Let's listen to Pavarotti.
Hello, welcome to The Revealing. I'm your host, Pavarotti, and I'm here to discuss the Idaho 4 case. As a disclaimer, this channel is for entertainment purposes. These are my opinions, not your slander. Let's get started. I'm going to provide information and give you my opinion on it. Now, in this video, I'm doing this for some of my subscribers, also some other commenters out there that are having a difficult time with my assertion that is Bryan Kohbergers' car entering the neighborhood at 4:04, and yet Bryan Kohberger is still innocent. So what I want to do in this one is ask you to keep an open mind and really put your thinking caps on, because I'm going to go into some information. It's very detailed. It's going to be easy for it to go over your head. So I'm going to ask you to really think deeply in this one as I go through it, and I hope that it helps you. There are some truths that you have to come to grips with if you really want to understand this situation. Now, folks, I'm going to ask you to think on a whole nother level with this. And as I go through this, it's probably going to go over most people's heads, and it's going to get confusing to a lot of people, but I have to do it because for those of you that can truly comprehend this, in the end, I think you'll understand where I'm coming from. Now, you can see this chart here that I've made. It says if Kohberger went to Wawawe, stargazed, and I'm just using that as a slight, and went back home, never crossing the state line that night at all, and that's what a lot of people want to believe, then how did they get to Kohberger? And you really have to come to grips with this. I think it's important because once we get to trial, if you truly believe this first box, then when they bring up what really happened on that evening, you're going to be one of those that goes from I think he's innocent to I think he's guilty the moment they bring this up. And that is going to be a tragedy for you and for the defense, because believing that statement and then getting to trial and seeing what they're really presenting shouldn't make you think he's guilty if you have an open mind and you understand this going into it. But that first statement being very important, and you can see then it's got lines going to the confidential informant, the DoorDash secret witness, then we've got the DNA on the sheath, the IgG, is it either manipulated or not? And then you can see I have lines going to why the secrecy disclosing the entire alibi, why the need for the defense to seal and gag everything. And finally at the bottom, it says it wasn't the WSU officers finding the Elantra because that didn't happen till December 20th, and that's admitted in court. So that's the first thing that we have to eliminate from this for us to truly understand. And when we go to the PCA, you see it says on November 25th, 2022, MPD asked area law enforcement agencies to be on the lookout for a white Hyundai Elantras in the area. And then on November 29th, 2022, at approximately 12:28 a.m., they get real specific here. Washington State University, police officer Daniel Tiengo queried white Elantras registered at WSU. As a result of that query, he located a 2015 white Elantra with a Pennsylvania license plate, and the vehicle was registered to Kohberger. And then if you read the PCA from this point forward, the PCA describes everything that happened in the investigation after this officer Tiengo found the white Elantra that belonged to Kohberger. And they portrayed the PCA as the investigation into Kohberger starting on November 29th. However, I spent too much trying to reason with everybody and saying this did not happen on November 29th. They couldn't have known about this until December 20th. And then finally, I was vindicated in court by Brett Payne.
Part of the affidavit where you talked about WSU officers identifying white Elantras.
Yes, ma'am.
Does December 20th, 2022 sound familiar to you?
Yes, ma'am.
And so this conversation with this officer from Washington, it related backwards to when he noticed an Elantra. Is that right?
Yes, ma'am.
But when he noticed it, you didn't know about that yet. Is that also correct?
That is correct.
So this may have happened, but Brett Payne, the lead detective in the Kohberger investigation, never talked to Officer Daniel Tiengo until December 20th. When she got him to admit that on stand, that was huge, because everything in the PCA after November 29th that talked about the investigation into Kohberger, we then knew none of that took place until December 20th and beyond. And that was a huge revelation in the case. So that part has to be totally eliminated because it's been proven in court as false. So now when we look at this chart that I've made for you, you can see there are two different categories. You'll see on the left, it goes to the DoorDash secret witness and the confidential informant. And then on the right, it goes to the DNA on the sheath, the IgG, manipulated or not, why the secrecy with disclosing the entire alibi from the defense, and why the need for the defense to seal and gag everything. You see, I've got them on two different sides because you can't have them all. It's either one side or the other. And let me explain further. Because the confidential informant, you see, if there is a confidential informant in the case, and Kohberger never went to Moscow that night at all, then there would not be a confidential informant in the case. There wouldn't have been anything for them to inform on. And we know that there is a confidential informant, and I'm not going to pull up every reason why we know that because I've done video after video explaining this. But the main things we know that leads to us knowing there's a confidential informant is the court records itself. It lists confidential informant in there many times. The investigation timeline, without a confidential informant, the timeline is not capable. It's not capable. And even the Steve G texts that they have verified are real explicitly state 3 times that there is a confidential informant in the case. And no, Steve G was not going to meet the confidential informant at a hotel room, and the FBI stopped him from doing that and warned him and threatened him. And he was not going to meet an IgG at a hotel room, I assure you folks. So there is a confidential informant in the case. And if you believe that, if you believe the evidence that shows that, then you have to believe that Kohberger went to Moscow the night of the unalivings. There's no way to believe them both. Then we have the DNA on the knife sheath. Let's do this. The DNA on the knife sheath. Is it manipulated or not? Then you can see there are 2 different ways of thinking. And again, I've said this many times in my videos. If you go to the right on this thinking, then you're making your mind up, basically, that you believe Kohberger is guilty. If you go to the left, you believe what I think is the truth. But if you go to the right here, you see the IgG led to Bryan organically, which means the DNA on the sheath does belong to Bryan. There was enough for them to complete a real IgG investigation that led to Bryan. And if you believe that, then there is no confidential informant because the IgG is the confidential informant. And you also believe the DoorDash driver is not a secret witness because there would be no need for a secret witness. The IGG would have led to Bryan, and Bryan would be the assailant in this case because his DNA would have been on that knife sheath and it was his. Now, if you're like me and you follow facts, then you know that the IGG was manipulated. They reversed the process working backwards to Bryan and made it Bryan. And I've done so many videos on the DNA on the sheath and how they did that. I'm not going to get into all the specifics in this one. But then, if you believe that, then that means a confidential informant led them to Bryan, and the DoorDash driver is the state's secret witness. Confidential informant. Based on court records, Steve G. Tex, the investigation timeline, and about 1,000 other data points, if he did not go to Moscow, there could not be a confidential informant. The DoorDash secret witness, we know that from court records. It is clear that the DoorDash driver is going to be a key piece to this case. And also, every guilter creator out there, folks, they have inside knowledge that the DoorDash driver is the secret witness. So prepare yourself. The DoorDash driver is the secret witness in this case. I have made the case, as well as I believe the defense has as well, by stating that the state's secret witness was going to corroborate Mr. Kohberger's story on the stand. But I've made the case that the secret witness DoorDash driver is Emma Bailey, and she was actually meeting Mr. Kohberger to provide him narcotics that evening, because that's where the facts have led me. But if he did not go to Moscow, there could not be a secret witness because there would have been nothing for them to witness. So you've got to get around that in your mind. Then, for those of you that think that Bryan Kohberger's attorney and Cy Ray have stated that he never went to Moscow, I can assure you, I've watched every hearing now twice looking for this unicorn. It has never, ever been stated by Ann Taylor nor Cy Ray in court that Bryan Kohberger never went to Moscow the night of the atrocity. And when you look at his last alibi statement, believe me, they would not put this paragraph at the end of it if everything was being put out there about where he was. And it says additional information as to Mr. Kohberger's whereabouts as the early morning hours progressed. As the early morning hours progressed, including additional analysis by Mr. Ray, will be provided once the state provides discovery requested, now subject to an upcoming motion to compel. So what they're stating is he went to Wawa Park, but then they'll tell you additional information about his whereabouts once they get discovery. They needed all of the discovery before they actually put out there that, yeah, he went to the neighborhood, because they want to prove that he did not go into the house. You've got to come to grips with that. And when you follow this logical line of thinking, and then you take the information that we know, that 252 was the last time the white Elantra was seen on the WSU campus. If you take that particular point in time and you go to Wawa, it tells you it's 27 minutes. It's a 27-minute drive. But then as the early morning hours progressed, if you take that same drive and you go to the King Road neighborhood, it puts you there a little after 4 a.m. What the defense is stating by this is he did not enter the neighborhood until 4 a.m., which proves he's not the white car that circles at 3:30, 3:37, and 3:50, which the PCA states it did, and we see verification that some car was circling at those times on the Linda Lane footage. That could not have been Kohberger's car if he went to Wawa first. This is what I'm trying to get across. And if law enforcement uses the DoorDash driver as the secret witness, and we know they didn't arrive until 4 a.m., being in the DoorDash driver, then that means the DoorDash driver must have still been there past 4:04 because the Elantra does not arrive in the neighborhood until 4:04. And that is verified by both the PCA and the Linda Lane camera footage. So if the DoorDash driver got there and dropped off the DoorDash and then left before 4:04, they wouldn't have even seen Kohberger's car coming into the neighborhood. So that means Kohberger couldn't have met them at their house on Ridge Road. He had to have met them in the neighborhood. The times don't allow it any other way. So when I put all of this together, believe me, it's not willy-nilly. This is a very detailed, thought-out investigation into this case. And Bryan Kohberger, even though that is his vehicle, pulling into the neighborhood at 4 a.m. and making all those erratic turns because that was the first time he was in the neighborhood, and he cannot park his car, folks. I'm going to prove it until 4:09. And if the video caught him leaving the neighborhood fast at 4:20, that means he's in his car driving out of there at 4:20. I'm going to prove that that's not enough time for one individual to get out of his car, walk down to the house, enter the house, go upstairs, unalive 2 people, go downstairs, unalive 2 people more, and then get back to his car in time to be able to make that possible. It is impossible. And that certainly doesn't include him taking his clothes off and running out naked like BF says she saw. It's all impossible. So what happened was, as he's sitting there meeting the DoorDash driver, he got his narcotics. They sat there a little bit longer. They heard screams and people running out of the house, and that's why they hit the gas and got out of the neighborhood, and the video catches them at 4:20 doing that. But what it doesn't say is the video should have caught another vehicle leaving at about 4:25, because we see it leaving from the Linda Lane footage at 4:23. It doesn't say anything about that vehicle leaving. That vehicle, my friends, is the perpetrators leaving. So here's what I want you to really ask yourself. Any one of these things can obviously be explained away. I'll get so many comments explaining away the DoorDash secret witness, or the confidential informant, or the DNA, or the secrecy disclosing the entire alibi, or why the need for the defense to seal and gag. But if you're going to do that, you're wasting your time, because you cannot explain away one of those without explaining away the other 4 to make it not true. If you can explain away all 5 of those and still make it work, I would love to hear your argument. So that is a lot of information. It requires a lot of thinking, and I'm not trying to be condescending and say that I'm always right, but I believe if you truly go through the information I just provided you and you really think it through, you will come to the same conclusions that I have. And again, I know I'm going to get comments explaining away one aspect of everything that I discussed. But really think hard, because you can explain away one, but if you can explain away every single aspect that I just discussed, then I would love to hear your argument, because I don't believe it can be done. I don't think you can explain away every one, and if you explain away one, you have to explain them all away for it to work, I assure you. But please like and subscribe to the channel. Post your comments, your thoughts, criticisms. Till next time, Pavarotti's out.